part. A lot of time has been put into it to date. So we recognize that and want to continue to acknowledge um, all of the effort and work that has been put into this licensure to date, and that you all will continue to put into it. So thank you again. So we want to start by setting the stage with logistics, making sure that we have a smooth system for running these meetings. So what we were able to do last time that I think worked well, that we will continue to apply moving forward, is to have everyone keep their video and audio off during the meetings. And then you use the raise hand function if you have something that you want to share. And then you just wait to be called on. Once you've been called on, just give us one moment before you start speaking or signing, because we want to make sure that we have you spotlighted so that everybody can see you before we begin. Um, and then once you're done, turn your video and audio off again, and then we'll continue that way. So hopefully that'll let us focus in on the people that are speaking without distractions. As far as folks that are viewing, this is going to be strictly work group member participation only. But of course, folks that are viewing can share any written commentary, any background information that they want to share ahead of meetings, or responses to comments on things that happen after meetings. Feel free to share that with any of us, any of our emails that you have, or any member of the work group. But during these meetings, it is strictly for work group members to participate. So I'm going to jump now into giving a bit of a rundown of how we view these meetings to go, sort of a roadmap for this work group. We have a lot of work to do. We have a short amount of time to do it. So we want to make sure that each meeting is used very efficiently. So we're going to, based off of the feedback that we've received this past meeting, as well as just over the course of years plus worth of conversation relating to the licensure, we were able to sort of break these into buckets of issue areas or areas of concern. And we'll categorize the next few meetings based on that. So I shared that in the email with the work group members earlier today, and it has broken up by date, each sort of bucket of topics that we will be discussing that day. And so in preparation for those meetings, we will have work group members send any proposals, any ideas, as I mentioned, anything that you want to raise in relation to that day's topic. If you can send that on the Friday ahead of that meeting, prior to that meeting. So the first or the next meeting will be on December 15th. On December 15th, we will discuss consumer choice and the broader licensure requirements. So based off of the conversations in these past meetings and the feedback that we've received, those are two buckets that warrant conversation and review across the board. So that will be dedicated, that date, December 15th, will be dedicated to those topics. So on the Friday, so that would be Friday the 12th, you would send in any commentary you have, any proposals relating to the consumer choice piece or relating to the broader licensure requirements. And then we would review them and discuss them in the meeting on December 15th. So that is just sort of a sample of how it would run. But again, all of this information is in that agenda that I sent out earlier today. Again, happy to discuss. Feel free to share send us an email with any comments on what that agenda looks like. And we can take time offline off of these meetings to iron that out. But we want to make sure that when we're in the meeting, we're spending it talking about substantive issues. And I see a message in the chat. I'm sorry. Just want to make sure. So Friday, everything could be submitted by close of business that Friday, I think that would be great. I will confirm in another email if that timeline changes, but by the end of that day, Friday would be great to make sure that we have some time to send that out and review for Monday's meeting. I'll go over some of the other topics for the other dates, just so you all know how it's broken down. Again, this is in the email that I sent, but just wanted to run through it. So on December 22nd, we would then be discussing some of the specialty pieces of the statute, board membership, board meetings, and reporting requirements. And then on the 29th, we would hopefully be doing a final review and adopting a final proposal. Of course, if some of these pieces take a little bit longer to talk about, we have, built in some additional meetings, so we have some room for that. We don't want at all want to suggest that we're trying to rush conversation in one session or in 30 minutes. We intend to, take some time to have these conversations, and so we can adjust that if needed. But that is the sort of tentative plan for the next few meetings and the breakdown of how we'll be discussing the statute. And I see Tina has her hand raised.
I had to make sure I had a pin. Hi there, I'm Tina, joiner of Maryland Association for the Deaf President. I do want to comment a little bit about what I've seen in the past. I've been watching the board statute meetings starting when they was first implemented about 2 years, and I feel like some of those issues have already been resolved. So I'm going to refer to Leslie Pruzio, and she has all the information that where it's been resolved. So it's good to go ahead and just to save our time and look through these and see what's already been resolved, and then we can focus on the other stuff after that. So I'm going to have Leslie take over.
Thank you, Tina. Appreciate the suggestion and appreciate Leslie's offers to provide some background information. And we definitely will have time in each meeting for each corresponding issue area and topic to make sure that we discuss it. We're also happy to connect with Leslie, and she can share if, whatever background information she feels would be helpful for sort of addressing things that may have been discussed. But we are taking a fresh look at the statute, and so want to make sure that we are looking at the statute as it was passed, as it was enacted, and reviewing from there. But in each meeting, again, we are fully prepared to have context from folks who were there, like Leslie. Happy to have her share those updates and that information as we discuss those topics when they're presented. But want to make sure that we have an opportunity for everybody to, there was not a convening in this way the first time. And so since there is, we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to take a look at things. Righty. All right. So that is the breakdown for the meetings. As far as decision making, I know that's a major piece is how are we going to come to consensus? How are we going to figure out what that final proposal is going to be? And so we think that what would work best would be to vote on each proposal. The goal is consensus, and so majority rules in that sense. But we'll be making sure that as issues are voted on, work group staff is keeping keeping count of the votes and making sure that notes are kept in relation to any conversations that are had around each proposal. Again, this is a new work group that we're forming here, and so we're open to suggestions as this process moves along. But I think it only makes sense for us to collectively take votes on each proposal as they arise. So then I am now going to jump to Hannah. So we're going to try to round us out by giving a overview of the Sign Language Interpreters Act as it was passed in 2023. Again, like we said, we want to start this off with everyone starting sort of at the same basis of information. So we're going to run through it, and feel free to, let us know any questions that you have at the end once Hannah gets through. Thank you.
So I think before I start, let's go to Bill. Bill, do you have a question?
Wait. I have to pin. I have to pin you. Okay, go ahead. Okay, for the interpreter, I'm putting English in the chat. You can read this. Okay, last week I asked if the governor intended for this work group to redo all the work that has been done to date, the previous legislation, and the work of the licensure board. At that time, we were told no, we want to build on that. Now, this implies to me that there were specific issues with the legislation that, as written, that are preventing progress on the regulations. If there was only an issue with the regulations, then we would not need to revisit the legislation itself. Now, with that in mind, someone or some organizations must have raised specific issues with the legislation to the governor and his staff that caused the brakes to be put on the work of the licensure board to ensure that we are progressing as efficiently as possible. Can the identity of these groups and their specific issues be shared?
Sure. So I can take that question. And then Laura, maybe if you want to add anything when I'm done, that would be good.
If we can hold for the interpreter switching, please. Go ahead.
Okay. Should I repeat anything?
Go ahead.
Okay. So sorry, I lost my train of thought for a moment. Bill, I think you have captured everything accurately. We are not redoing the statute. We are building on the work that has already been done. And I think you're absolutely right that there are areas of concern that are preventing the regulations from moving forward as they are now. And that's the focus of this work group. And those areas are the areas that Laura just highlighted earlier that the next two meetings will focus on. And that's consumer choice, licensure requirements, specialties, board membership, board meetings, reporting requirements. These are sort of from the first meeting, the conversation at the first meeting, as well as comments that we received ahead of that first meeting. These are the categories that we've identified of the large areas of concern. And in terms of who that's coming from, some of those are members on the work group, your co-work group members. Some of those are organizations or individuals that are listening to us tonight. I know for sure we have many of them listening in. And I think there's also, a lot of overlap with the comments that the board received during the draft regulatory process as well. So it's, several organizations. I don't want to take up too much time, but I know that many of them spoke to their concerns at our first meeting, and some of them have expressed intent to provide some written comments to the work group that we'll distribute as well, for any individual or any organization who was not able to be on the work group itself but wishes to provide comments. We have expressed to them that they are welcome to provide written comments, and we'll distribute those to the board. And that's not for any particular perspective or anything. That's for anyone listening who would like to share any proposals, thoughts, concerns, anything at all.
Okay, thank you for that response. I have noticed that on the agendas for the meetings, it seems like a lot of this is related to regulations and not so much legislation. So I don't know if my co-group people um, know any are pointing back to the legislation, but does that mean we aren't moving forward with any of these issues that with those resolutions? Are we doing away with those, or are we focusing only on specific changes that need to be made to the legislation itself? I think it would be that's a pretty good summarization of your comment, as I understand it, right?
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure we use our time for the work group wisely and we focus on making the changes to the legislation. The regulations have already, we already have people for that. We're skilled and experienced on that, but I think we should focus on the legislation. If something comes up that is regulatory in nature and that's an issue, that needs to be moved over to those people who are experts in that. Am I correct?
Yes, Bill, once again, you're absolutely correct. And thank you very much for the opportunity. Uh,
And then also, thank you for that. Thank you. And then also, so for this meeting,
well, if I can, before you keep going, if I can finish my thought, because I wasn't finished, I did.
oh, yes, please.
You raised an important point, and I just wanted to make sure that it's absolutely clear for everyone, both in the work group and also listening, is that the purpose of this work group is to focus on statutory changes. We are not taking up any proposed changes to the regulations themselves. Those regulations are put on pause, and the board, SBSLI, will take up the regulations once the legislative session has passed, because obviously that framework for the regulations comes from the underlying statute. But you are 100% correct. We are not making any changes to the regulations. We are purely focused on the statute. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for clarifying that. I agree with that. I think we are on the same page there. As well, I wanted to make a comment about this meeting, the upcoming meeting changes, people joining and quitting. I'm wondering if it's possible for us to pull from there and poll the public to see if they're available um, to catch up what you see if you're missed. Or if we can, sorry, if we can download the recordings so people can catch up on what they may have missed and people who are joining can watch those to catch up. I'm wondering if we, and then we can get their live opinions on that.
And we can post
Okay.
them on YouTube for the community to be able to see.
And we can post it on community for everyone to see.
Okay, so the question, just to make sure I understand the question is about providing the meeting recordings or some notes or minutes for people viewing.
Yes, this meeting and the future meetings. Would we be able to share those recordings and make them available and accessible to our members later for review and also for the public to view if they wish to themselves? Some people can't join at 5:30 or 1:30, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand the question now. Thank you. I think that's something we can accommodate. I think Laura and I will connect with our staff at the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing afterwards and figure out something that works. I know, for example, today we had a couple work group members who were unable to attend at this time, and so we want to make sure that they stay up to date as well. So thank you for that suggestion.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that comment. Thank you. Bye.
All right, all very good questions. Okay, so now we're going to move forward with the next topic, which is related to one of the questions Bill just had, a review of the legislation. Once again, this work group is focused just on the legislation, so we want to make sure that everyone, there are some people on the work group and listening that have been very extensively involved in this legislation and are, very familiar with it. It's been a couple of years since it passed, and we have some members who may be a little bit less familiar with it or are learning about it a little newer than some other members. So we're just going to review it to make sure it's fresh in your minds. And I am also going to ask for a little bit of help, maybe from Laura or Diamond or Ashurla, if you would be able to share the bill. I am traveling for work and I have a very small screen today in my hotel room. So I'm a little, uh, don't have as many resources as I usually do. It looks like someone put it in the chat, which is very helpful. And I can maybe just go ahead and start. But if anyone is able to screen share as well, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, Hannah, 1 second. Let me try to do it as well.
Thank you. But while Laura is pulling it up, I'll go ahead and get started. So the Maryland Sign Language Interpreters Act was passed in 2023, and it establishes the licensing and regulatory system for sign language interpreters under the State Board of Sign Language Interpreters, or SBSLI, in the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Oh, great. Thank you, Laura. All right, so I am just going to walk through and I'll prompt Laura to move through the bill as I go through each section. So Laura, if you want to go down a little bit to the first section. So all of this is, you can stop right there, Laura. All of this is in the state government article. So the Sign Language Interpreters Act starts with Section 92401, which establishes various definitions. I'm not going to go through all of these because we're just doing a summary today, but we have emailed out the link to workgroup members. So please, if you haven't had a chance, maybe take a look at this as well ahead of the next meeting. But you can keep going, Laura. There's several different definitions here. And then the next section is 9-2403, which relates to the responsibilities of the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And Laura, if you keep scrolling down to the bold language in this section, you will see right here in 13 and 14 that this act, the purpose of the act in this, as it relates to this section, was to add a reporting requirement for activities of the board and include sign language interpreters. I apologize, I'm reading from the wrong bullet point. In this section, which establishes the responsibilities of ODHH, it adds staffing for the board, that's SBSLI, and provides a nomination process for board appointments. So then you can keep scrolling, Laura, down to 9-2407, which is right here. And so this is the part that I mistakenly started reading before. This has to do with the ODHH annual report, and the act adds a reporting requirement for activities of the board, including sign language interpreters licensed and complaints received. So you can keep going, Laura. And sections 9-2410 through 9-2435, you can pause, but all of these pertain to sign language interpreters. So 9-2410 establishes the board itself. It's just a single sentence whenever Laura gets up there, but I'll keep going. 9-2411 identifies the 7 members appointed to the board, as well as the appointment process, the requirements, the terms, and the grounds for removal. Section 9-2412 establishes the chair of the board, including the selection and the term for the chair. It also requires the board to meet at least monthly, but it can meet more, and establishes a quorum. It also prohibits board members from receiving compensation except certain standard reimbursements. The next section, which is right at the bottom of this page, 9-2413, authorizes the board to conduct investigations and to hold hearings in consultation with ODHH. The next section requires the board to license qualified individuals to provide sign language interpretation services, promulgate regulations by July 1st, 2024, provide technical assistance to applicants, and promote the profession. This section also establishes other duties of the board, like adopting bylaws and a seal, keeping a record of its proceedings, keeping files on applicants, and establishing a visiting sign language interpreter registry, developing a website, and seeking funding sources. Section 9-2415 pertains to the specialty areas, and this section authorizes but does not require the board to establish criteria for several different specialist areas which are listed. This section also requires the board to adopt regulations that do a few different things, governing video remote interpreting, establishing standards for interpreting agencies that operate in the state, allowing individuals to select a preference for video or in-person interpreting services, and to provide video remote interpreting services. The next section, 9-2416, authorizes the board to set reasonable licensing fees and establishes the sign language interpreter's special fund to retain those fees. And the fund can only be used to cover costs associated with the statutory and regulatory duties of the board. And there's a couple examples listed in there, like mentorship and other licensure programs. The next section, 9-2417, specifies that the board exercises its powers, duties, and functions subject to the authority of the governor. The next section, right below it, 9-2418, requires an individual to be licensed before providing or representing interpretation services. And there are certain exceptions established here, including in certain settings, interpretation services provided as part of an internship or other practicum. Second, services provided as part of a video relay service. Third, an individual who holds a nationally or regionally recognized certificate and does not provide services for more than 80 hours in a calendar year. Another exception is an uncompensated volunteer in a setting where an interpreter is not otherwise required by law. Providing services in an emergency to prevent undue harm until a licensed interpreter is available. And last, interpretation between a pair of sign languages for which there is no national or regional certification. Then moving to section 9-2419, this section establishes application requirements such as the form, an application fee, proof of certification, and documentation of other qualifications established by the board. The next section, 9-2420, establishes waivers the board may grant for applicants licensed in another state. Qualifications must be substantially similar, and the state in which the applicant is licensed must similarly waive qualification requirements. The next section, 9-2421, upon qualifying for licensure, the board must notify the applicant, and the applicant must pay the license fee in order to receive the license. Licenses are not transferable, and licensees must notify the board of changes to name or address. Section 9-2422 establishes the scope of the license. Section 9-2423 pertains to expiration and renewal of licenses. Section 9-2424 provides for reinstatement of a license under certain circumstances. And section 9-2425 establishes provisional licenses for an individual who has passed a national or regional exam or other exam approved by the board and satisfied other requirements established by the board. The board also is authorized to establish an application process for provisional licensure for applicants who have not passed an exam. Provisional license holders may not provide services in certain settings, And a provisional license is only good for 3 years, but can be renewed for an additional 2-year term for a total of 5 years. And then the following sections, there are still several of them, but they primarily relate to disciplinary procedures, hearings, and violations.
Sorry, could you hold just 1 second? We're just going to change interpreters real quick. I'm sorry.
Sure. Okay. So I see in the chat, the interpreters have asked, would you like interpreters to verbally announce changes? And yes, that would be helpful. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to pick back up. Section 9-2426 begins a number of sections that primarily relate to disciplinary procedures, hearings, and violations. These are not areas that we have really heard any concerns about, so I'm going to move pretty quickly through them. The first one identifies circumstances under which the board may deny licensure, reprimand, suspend, or revoke a license. There are also, and I see Laura's moving quicker than I am, but that's okay because these are all, the next section is disciplinary procedures. Then we have a hearing process. We have a requirement for regulations related to reactivation of a suspended license. We have a requirement that confidential information has to remain confidential. Section 2431 relates to unlicensed individuals and allows the board to fine violations. Section 9-2432 prohibits someone from representing sign language services unless they're licensed or otherwise authorized under law. Section 9-2433 indicates that a person who receives services from an unlicensed interpreter may seek judicial action. Section 9-2434 establishes penalties for violations. And then Section 9-2435 provides a sunset of July 1st, 2033 for the board and the regulatory structure. And this is very normal for industry regulations in Maryland, that they have some sunset date at which the legislature takes up a review and reauthorizes that board and the regulatory structure. Then there are a few uncodified sections at the end of the bill here. The first one, Section 4, requires implementation by January 2025, requires the board to implement a public awareness campaign, and sets the initial licensure fee. Sections 5 and 6 establish requirements and terms for initial board appointments. Section 7 mandates a budget for fiscal year 25, which has already closed. We're currently in state fiscal year 26. And then Section 8 at the end requires a biannual report from the judiciary beginning in January 2026. So I know that was a lot, but we are now at the end of the bill. And hopefully everyone has a chance to take a closer look at the areas that we've identified for discussion at the next 2 meetings. And then again, we've asked anyone with proposals in those areas to send those proposals in writing so that we can distribute them to board members ahead of those conversations. So Laura, I think I'll turn it back over to you unless there are any questions.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Hannah. And so as she said, the goal of this first meeting and of running through the legislation was to make sure that we're starting with the same set of information. And so having a chance to look through the parts that will be up for conversation and sort of at in question during these meetings, and also to see what sections there haven't been many concerns around, and so we likely won't spend any time on those. So again, anything that you have to share ahead of this next meeting, the December 15th meeting, please share by Friday. Any proposals that relate to those sections, consumer choice and licensure requirements, please feel free to share. Any background information that you think would be helpful, please feel free to share it with us beforehand, and we can make sure that that's incorporated into the conversation. As we said, we really want to make sure that we're using our time wisely in these meetings, and so we hear all the feedback from you all as well, and greatly appreciate it. Alrighty, if there's no questions, I will let everyone go for the evening. I think we have a question from Caitlin.
Yes, I do have a question. Can you hear me? Nope. Unmute. Oh, you can. Okay, good. My question is about the voting process at the end. Will voting be anonymous?
We hadn't ironed that part out, whether it would be anonymous, but I think Hannah and we can make sure that we discuss that. That's an important consideration if we think that works for the group. I think anonymous voting is definitely an option.
Also, will we have an opportunity to propose any other topics or areas of concern for discussion that were not already listed?
Yes, please. Please feel free to share those via email as well. After this meeting, anytime over the week, if you think that there's something that we missed, we'd be happy to review it.
Awesome.
And if I can interrupt quickly, I'm sorry. It sounds like from the chat, some people are having difficulty understanding the questions. So if we can make sure the interpreter is interpreting all verbal questions, that would be helpful. So the first, Laura, do you want to review the 2 questions and answers that were asked?
Yes, one second.
You can also sit on my hands.
Okay, sorry.
They probably don't see you because there's so many people in this group.
Okay, the 2 questions. Oh, okay, sorry. I thought they were in the chat. It was just the ones Caitlin mentioned. Okay, so Caitlin's first question was around whether or not there would be anonymous voting. So whether or not we would know who specifically voted what on each proposal. And my response was that we hadn't discussed that piece yet, but would be happy. I would think Hannah would agree to discuss having that be a feature of the voting decision-making process, is to have that be anonymous. So that's the first question. And then Caitlin's second question was whether or not there would be an opportunity for you all to suggest any issue areas that were not listed already on the breakdown. And my response to that is yes, we welcome anything that you think we might have missed. Again, we based it off of the different comments we had received, different outreach and conversations we had had. We based it as well off of the responses in the last meeting, but we welcome anything that you all think we might have missed. We're happy to take a look at that.
Awesome. I have one last question, and that is, should we continue to email each other as a group with thoughts and ideas? Is that appropriate between public meetings?
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I'll just add on that last question. I agree, that's fine. We do, though, want to make sure that we have a comprehensive packet of proposals or information ahead of each discussion. So please make sure that Laura and I get all of those, even if there is additional conversation in between.
I believe we have Leslie up next.
Thank you. I have 3 questions. First, I do know that you want us to submit all of the comments and thoughts by Friday before. Do you mind if Laura and Hannah, do you mind sharing on the information, submitting it to the work group by Sunday so each work group can review that before the meeting? So, and we have good intentional discussions.
You're asking, so instead of having it submitted by, so let's say for the 15th, you're saying to have it submitted by Sunday, the 14th instead?
I think I understand the question.
Okay.
So work group members and anyone watching will submit written proposals to us by the end of the day, Friday, and then we will put everything together and send it out for review by Sunday. And I think, yes, that is a reasonable request, and we will do our best to get it out even sooner than that. But yes, I think Sunday is reasonable.
Thank you. My second, the statute, the requirements for the work group and the board is involved. We are over 10 people, so that means that we are all required to follow the open, meeting act. All work group members have already taken that AOUBA or the OMA.
So this, thank you for that question. And I may ask Jen Katz to pop up here. But the work group was not, the authority for the work group does not come from law. So we are not technically subject to the Open Meetings Act, although we are complying or mirroring, I guess I'll say, many of those requirements, including providing the agenda ahead of time, allowing others to watch. We just discussed earlier posting the recordings, so that we don't need workgroup members to do the Open Meetings Act training. You're correct, though, that for SBSLI, that's differently situated and is subject to the Open Meetings Act. So the requirements are different. But I'll just make sure, if Jen Katz is still on, that I captured that accurately.
That's correct, Hannah. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to clarify again. Bill had asked about what, the legislation, and there's a lot of conversation going around that's concerning, that's within
Regulations, regs.
yeah, regulations. Okay. With the regulations and a lot of talk and concern, with regulations not being in the legislation. So I'm not sure, it's still kind of fuzzy about what's the difference between the law that we're looking at and what's the regs as well. And, what the sponsors and what their views are about the law, because again, what we are discussing is, concerning their proposals are under the regs, but not under the law. So can you clarify that again? Or I guess the suggestion is just to start a law, that's write it down and then, throw away what we have and then grassroot that one into the law and then make that become a law. Embed it.
And the interpreters will be switching if you want to change the spotlight. Thank you.
Okay. Is it okay to go now? Okay. So Jen, I may ask you to help out with this one as well, but I'll take a first stab. So we have two separate things here. We have the law, the statute, that kind of has the base framework, and then we have the regulations that have not been promulgated yet, but are in draft form, I believe, but have been paused. And so the authority for the regulations comes from the underlying statute. That's where we have areas of concern that have been identified that made sense for us to pause the regulations in order to make changes to the statute. So, Jen, do you have a better way of kind of making this distinction between the two that might be helpful?
No, Hannah, can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm driving. No, I agree with you everything that you've just said. I think you said it very well.
Okay, but again, I am still confused as vague. I have concerns that have been brought up that are not in the legislation. So I'm concerned about the proposal of the regs right now. Those haven't been embedded within the law. That's my concern. So how the law is written is very blank right now in order to provide for regs or regulations. But my concern is that the things that we have proposed in relation to what has been related into the regulations is not included in the law. So again, maybe you're saying that we need to look at what's proposed for the regulations and those should be written into the legislation. Is that correct?
No, and I apologize. I may not be understanding the question, but we are not looking at the regulations. We are only looking at the statute.
Okay. Would you mind maybe sending out the law with those specific concerns that have been identified to the work group so that we can see what the concerns with the legislation are?
Yes. So I think what we have distributed to this point, a couple times we have sent the Sign Language Interpreters Act from 2023, but we are happy to send it again. And then what Laura
Sorry, maybe we
sent.
misunderstood. I would like to interrupt here. I'm not asking for the law itself. I am thoroughly aware of the law and how I've written it. You know, I'm very aware of the law. I am asking for you to just highlight what specific areas, what sections within the law that we are concerned about and what we are looking to revise.
Yes. So as I was saying, the other piece of this, aside from the law, is those buckets that Laura listed out earlier. And so I think the purpose of the walking through the bill that we did earlier was to help sort of everyone situate themselves in terms of where those buckets may overlap with the law. But in terms of specific proposals, that's what we've asked work group members and anyone listening who may be interested to send those written proposals to us so that we can share them with you all to review ahead of the next meetings. So I think that's where you'll see some of those specific
Okay, I can
where
follow
it
up with an
aligns
email
with the
because it
law.
seems like I'm not being very clear on what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Alrighty, if that is it for questions, then I think we're good to wrap up for today. Again, if there's any feedback on today's meeting, anything relevant to the upcoming meetings, please feel free to share. If you have proposals and things prepared for Monday's meeting, please share them by Friday, close of business. Monday's meeting will be discussing consumer choice and licensure requirements. Those are all in the agenda as well. So you can see what specific pieces we're looking at. You know where to reach us if you have any questions in the meantime. Thank you all so much.
I think there's a question in the chat.
Sorry. Okay.
So I can answer the question about work group membership. We've already selected the work group membership, and so this is the work group that we're moving forward with.
And then Juliana, I see your comment, and we will take that into consideration in coordinating, making sure that we have interpreters that work for everyone. But feel free to connect with us offline as well, and we'll work on ironing that piece out. All righty. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.